The conference room was filled with worried faces. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat around the massive circular table, their expressions showing fear and desperation. The holographic display in the center showed the same terrible picture that had been haunting their dreams for months. Red markers indicated destroyed worlds. Orange zones showed active war zones, and a massive purple arrow showed the direction the enemy was moving, toward the heart of civilized space. Ambassador Kelrin stood up slowly. His blue skin had lost its usual vibrant color, now appearing almost gray with stress. He was a Vexari, one of the oldest species in the Galactic Council. His people had seen wars before, survived conflicts that lasted generations. But this was different. This enemy did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply destroyed everything in their path. Honored council members, Kelrin began, his voice translator making his words understandable to all present. We have lost contact with the Korvath system. That makes 17 worlds that have fallen to the Krathi Dominion in just 3 months. Our combined fleets have engaged them 4 times. Each time we have been defeated. A murmur of despair rippled through the chamber. The Krathi were unlike anything the galaxy had faced in living memory. Their ships were massive organic constructs grown rather than built. Their weapons could pierce through shields that had protected civilizations for thousands of years. And they showed absolutely no mercy to anyone who stood in their way. What about the defense platforms at Korvath? Asked one of the representatives, a small insect-like being from the Chitauri species. Surely they held. Kelrin shook his head. The platforms were destroyed in the first hour of the attack. The Krathi fleet now surrounds the planet. 2 billion Vexari civilians are trapped on the surface. We estimate they have perhaps 20 hours before the bombardment begins. The chamber fell into heavy silence. Everyone present understood what that meant. 2 billion lives erased from existence. Families, children, entire cities reduced to ash and rubble. And there was nothing they could do about it. The Council's military forces were scattered, trying to defend too many worlds with too few ships. We must call for aid from everyone. Another representative spoke up. Every member species must contribute whatever forces they can spare. Kelrin nodded tiredly. We have sent requests to all members, including the newest addition to our council, the humans. Several representatives made dismissive gestures. Humanity had been discovered only 20 years ago, a young species that had barely figured out how to travel faster than light. Their ships were small and plain, lacking the elegant designs of the older civilizations. Their weapons were primitive magnetic accelerators and chemical missiles, nothing compared to the plasma cannons and energy lances of the established powers. What can they possibly offer? Someone scoffed. They have fewer than 60 warships in their entire fleet. They are children playing at being warriors. Kelrin did not argue. He had seen the human ship specifications himself. They looked unimpressive on paper, but something in his gut told him not to dismiss them so easily. Humans came from a harsh world, one that had forced them to fight for survival every single day. Maybe that counted for something. Thousands of light years away, Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the CSS Valiant, studying the same tactical displays that the Council had been reviewing. But Jake was seeing something different in those red markers and orange zones. He was seeing patterns, attack vectors, supply lines, weaknesses. Jake was a career military officer just like his father and grandfather before him. He had joined Earth's Space Navy the day he turned 18, and that was 30 years ago. He had worked his way up from enlisted ranks to command, earning every promotion through skill and dedication. He knew war. He understood it in ways that most civilians never could. Sir, we just received the formal request from the Galactic Council. Lieutenant Amy Hughes reported from her station. She was young, barely 25, but she was one of the best communications officers in the fleet. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic controls, bringing up the message for Jake to review. Jake read through it carefully. The Council was asking for any ships Earth could spare to help defend the Korvath system. The message was polite but carried an underlying tone that suggested they did not expect much. They were calling on humanity because they were desperate, not because they believed humans could make a difference. What do you think, Commander? Asked Lieutenant Pete Collins from the tactical station. Pete was older, in his 40s, with gray starting to show in his dark hair. He had been with Jake for 10 years, serving together on 3 different ships. Can we make a difference against these Krathi? Jake studied the tactical data again. 300 Krathi warships at Korvath. Each one was bigger than anything in the human fleet. On paper, it looked like suicide to engage them. But Jake had learned long ago that wars were not won on paper. They were won by strategy, training, and the will to fight. How many ships can we bring to bear? Jake asked. Pete checked his displays. Admiral Hayes has authorized a full battle group. 57 ships total. 4 battleships, 12 cruisers, 15 frigates, 8 carriers with full fighter wings, and the rest support vessels. Jake nodded slowly. 57 ships against 300. The Council would think they were insane to even try, but the Council did not understand how humans fought. They did not know about the years of simulation training every human crew went through. They did not know about the weapon systems that Earth had developed in secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. Send word to Admiral Hayes, Jake ordered. Tell him we are accepting the mission, and ask him to authorize full deployment protocols. We are not going to Korvath to delay the Krathi. We are going there to destroy them. Amy's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded and began composing the message. Pete pulled up star charts and began plotting the fastest route to Korvath. The rest of the bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role without needing to be told. Jake walked over to the main viewport and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 2 billion people were waiting to die, believing that no help was coming. They were wrong. Help was coming, and it was going to hit the Krathi like a hammer. How long until the fleet is assembled? Jake asked. 6 hours, sir, Pete replied. Every ship is being loaded with full ammunition stores and fuel. Medical teams are being briefed. Fighter pilots are running last-minute simulation drills. Jake allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humanity. They were about to learn that humans did not just fight to survive. When they saw innocent people threatened, when they saw bullies crushing the weak, something fundamental activated in the human spirit. They became protectors, defenders, warriors who would stand between the darkness and those who could not protect themselves. Make sure every ship knows the stakes, Jake said quietly. 2 billion lives depend on us. We do not fail. We do not retreat. We hit them with everything we have, and we do not stop until every single Krathi ship is either destroyed or surrendered. Within hours, the human fleet began gathering at the designated coordinates. Ship after ship dropped out of hyperspace, taking their positions in the formation. The CSS Valiant led the way, her sleek gray hull marked with the insignia of Earth's Space Navy. Behind her came the other battleships, the Defiant, the Resolute, and the Endeavor. Then the cruisers bristling with weapons. The carriers, each one holding dozens of advanced fighters. The frigates, fast and deadly. From the outside, they did not look like much. Human ships were built for function, not beauty. They were angular and practical, covered in armor plating and sensor arrays. But inside those hulls were weapon systems that the galaxy had never seen before. Magnetic accelerators that could fire projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. Laser arrays powerful enough to cut through solid steel like butter. Missile systems with intelligent guidance that could track targets through any countermeasure. And most importantly, inside those ships were human crews. Men and women who had trained their entire adult lives for combat. Who had run through thousands of battle simulations. Who had studied every major conflict in human history and learned from them. They were not flashy or arrogant. They were professionals, and they were about to show the galaxy what that meant. All ships report ready, Commander, Amy announced. Jake returned to his command chair and strapped in. Around him, the bridge crew did the same. This was it, the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. They could either prove themselves as warriors worthy of respect, or they could fail and condemn billions to death. All ships, Jake said into the fleet-wide channel. Jump coordinates are locked. We are going into a fight against an enemy that outnumbers us 5-1. They have bigger ships. They have more guns, but they do not have our training. They do not have our weapons, and they sure as hell do not have our determination. We are going to Korvath, and we are going to save those people. Engage hyperspace drives on my mark. He paused, letting the moment stretch out. Mark. Space twisted and bent as 57 human warships vanished, racing toward a distant battlefield where the fate of billions hung high. The Korvath system looked like a graveyard. Debris floated everywhere. The broken remains of defense stations and civilian ships that had tried to escape. Some pieces were still burning, fed by leaking oxygen tanks or chemical fires that refused to die in the vacuum of space. Emergency beacons blinked weakly from damaged vessels, calling for help that had not come. The planet itself hung in the void like a blue and green jewel, beautiful and peaceful from orbit. But that peace was a lie. On the surface, 2 billion Vexari huddled in shelters and bunkers, waiting for death to rain down from the sky. They had seen what the Krathi did to conquered worlds. There would be no mercy, no chance to surrender, only fire and destruction until nothing lived. Around the planet, the Krathi fleet waited like vultures circling a dying animal. 312 warships, each one a nightmare made real. They were not built like normal ships. Instead, they looked almost alive, with hulls that seemed to pulse and breathe. Their armor was organic, grown from genetic material harvested from conquered species. Veins of glowing energy ran through their structure, visible beneath translucent sections of hull. The largest of these ships was the Eternal Hunger, flagship of War Master Throck. On its bridge, if it could be called a bridge, Throck stood in a pool of nutrient fluid that fed directly into his armored exoskeleton. He was massive, even for a Krathi, standing nearly 3 meters tall. His body was covered in chitinous plates, and his forearms ended in claws that could tear through steel. "Status of the invasion force," Throck demanded, his voice a series of clicks and growls that his translator rendered into Galactic Standard. His tactical officer, a smaller Krathi named Vesh, consulted the organic displays that grew from the ship's walls. "Ground forces are prepared for deployment. The planetary defense grid has been destroyed. We can begin bombardment at any time, War Master." Throck's mandibles clicked together in satisfaction. This would be another easy victory. The Vexari had fought bravely, he would grant them that. But bravery meant nothing against superior force. Their fleets had been scattered, their defenses broken. Now all that remained was to harvest the planet's resources and add another species to the Dominion's collection. "Prepare to commence bombardment in one cycle," Throck ordered. "I want the major cities reduced to rubble first. Then we will process the survivors." Before Vesh could respond, one of the sensor operators made a confused, chittering sound. "War Master, we have new contacts emerging from hyperspace." Throck turned his massive head. "Reinforcements? How many vessels?" 57 ships, War Master." "They are human vessels." For a moment, Throck said nothing. Then he accessed the Dominion's database on known species. Humans, a young race, barely space-worthy. Their ships were primitive, their weapons laughable by Krathi standards. The database recommended minimal threat assessment. "Humans?" Throck's translator gave his voice a tone of amusement. "They dare to interfere? How entertaining. Ignore them for now. If they move to engage, assign a dozen frigates to destroy them. I will not let such insignificant creatures delay our conquest." Vesh hesitated. "War Master, should we not scan their vessels more carefully? We know little about their capabilities." "They are primitives," Throck snapped. "Continue with invasion preparations." "That is an order." At the edge of the system, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. On the bridge of the CSS Valiant, Commander Jake Morrison immediately began receiving data from his ship's advanced sensors. The tactical display painted a clear picture of the situation, and it was worse than the intelligence reports had suggested. 312 enemy contacts confirmed, Lieutenant Pete Collins reported from Tactical. "They are in standard siege formation around the planet. Scanning indicates they are charging weapons for orbital bombardment. Estimate 15 minutes until they begin firing on population centers." Jake's jaw tightened. 15 minutes. They had even less time than he thought. What about survivors from the Vexari Defense Forces? Amy worked her controls, searching through the communication frequencies. "I am picking up scattered transmissions. Looks like a few dozen ships survived and retreated to the outer system. They are badly damaged and in no condition to fight." "Try to contact them," Jake ordered. "Let them know help has arrived." "Pete, full sensor sweep of the enemy fleet. I want to know their formation, their weapon systems, everything." Pete's fingers danced across his holographic displays. Years of training and experience guided his analysis. They are grouped in clusters around the planet. Heavy ships in the center, smaller vessels on the perimeter. It is a standard bombardment formation, designed to maximize coverage of the surface, but it leaves them vulnerable to attack from multiple vectors. Jake studied the tactical display, his mind working through options and strategies. The Krathi outnumbered them badly. In a straight fight toe-to-toe, it would be a bloodbath. But humans did not fight fair. They fought smart. All ships activate stealth systems, Jake ordered. Reduce power emissions to minimum. Let us get close before they realize we are a threat. Across the fleet, advanced coding systems activated. The human ships had been designed with stealth in mind, using materials and shapes that absorbed sensor waves rather than reflecting them. Combined with reduced power output, they became nearly invisible to most detection systems. The human fleet glided forward, moving at a steady pace toward the Krathi formation. They were not trying to be completely invisible. That was impossible at this range. But they were making themselves look insignificant. Just another cluster of debris or disabled ships drifting through the system. On the Eternal Hunger, Vesh monitored the approaching humans with mild curiosity. War Master, the human vessels are approaching. They appear to be moving into weapons range. Throck glanced at the display with disinterest. Let them come. When they are close enough, destroy them quickly. I grow tired of delays, minutes ticked by. The human fleet continued its steady approach, now less than 1,000,000 kilometers from the Krathi formation. Close enough to engage, but still outside the effective range of most conventional weapons. The Krathi paid them little attention, focused instead on their preparations for the bombardment below. On the Valiant's bridge, Jake watched the range counter tick down. His crew sat at their stations, silent and focused. Each one knew their role. Each one had trained for this exact scenario hundreds of times in simulation. But this was real. Real ships. Real enemies. Real lives depending on them. Weapons range in 30 seconds, Pete announced quietly. Jake opened a fleet-wide channel. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady, showing none of the tension he felt inside. This is Commander Morrison to all ships. Those alien vessels down there came to this system to commit genocide. They plan to murder 2 billion innocent people and then move on to the next world. They think we are just another primitive species they can brush aside. They think our ships are weak and our weapons are toys. He paused, letting his words sink in. Let us show them exactly how wrong they are. All ships on my mark. Drop stealth systems and engage at will. Target priority is their heavy ships first. Fire everything you have got. Make every shot count. Mark. For one last moment, the human fleet glided forward in silence, seeming small and insignificant against the massive Krathi armada. Then, in perfect synchronization, 57 warships dropped their stealth systems and activated their weapons. Space erupted into violence. The magnetic accelerator cannons fired first. These were not the primitive railguns that many species used. These were advanced systems that used powerful magnetic fields to accelerate solid slugs to incredible speeds. The projectiles left the barrels at 70% of light speed, each one carrying the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon. 17 Krathi ships never knew what hit them. The slugs punched through their shields as if they were not there, the kinetic energy too fast and too powerful for the shields to deflect. The projectiles tore through organic armor, through internal structures, through power cores. Ships that had survived dozens of battles simply came apart, their hulls rupturing from the inside out. Then the lasers fired. Human laser technology had progressed far beyond what most of the galaxy used. These were not the weak cutting tools or communication devices of older designs. These were weapons-grade systems capable of delivering focused beams of coherent light, powerful enough to burn through meters of solid metal in seconds. The beams lanced out across the void, invisible to the naked eye but devastating in their effect. They carved through Krathi armor with surgical precision, targeting weak points and critical systems. Engine sections exploded. Weapon batteries went silent. Ship after ship found themselves crippled or destroyed before they could react. And then the missiles launched, thousands of them streaming from the human ships in waves. But these were not simple explosive projectiles. Each missile carried an advanced guidance system, able to think and adapt to changing battlefield conditions. They wove through point defense fire, accelerated and decelerated in random patterns, cooperated with each other to overwhelm targets. When they hit hard. Plasma warheads detonated, releasing temperatures hot enough to melt through any known material. Some missiles were designed to burrow into the target before exploding. The battle had been raging for 5 minutes, and the Krathi fleet was dying. War Master Throck watched his tactical display with growing horror as ship after ship went dark. His magnificent armada, the force that had conquered 17 worlds, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy he had dismissed as primitive. Status report, Throck demanded. his voice carrying an edge of desperation that his crew had never heard before. Vesh consulted the organic displays, his clawed hands shaking slightly. "We have lost 93 vessels, War Master. Another 47 are heavily damaged and withdrawing from combat. The humans are using electronic warfare systems we cannot counter. Our targeting computers are being jammed, our communications disrupted. Ships cannot coordinate their fire." Throck slammed one of his forearms against his command pool, sending nutrient fluids splashing. "How is this possible? They are humans, children among the stars. How can they possess such technology?" But no one on the bridge had an answer. The truth was becoming clear with each passing second. The galaxy had underestimated humanity badly. While the established civilizations had grown comfortable with their advanced technology, content to rest on achievements from thousands of years ago, humans had been building and innovating. They had taken a harsh world and turned themselves into warriors, and now they were showing everyone what that meant. On the bridge of the CSS Defiant, Captain Nick Bradley coordinated his battleship's fire with cold precision. Nick was a veteran of 15 years, known throughout the fleet for his tactical brilliance. His ship was one of the heaviest in the human navy, built specifically to go toe-to-toe with the biggest threats. "Target that dreadnought on our starboard side," Nick ordered. "Full broadside, all weapons." The Defiant's entire right side lit up as every weapon mounted on that hull fired at once. Magnetic accelerators, laser arrays, missile tubes, everything launched toward the massive Krathi vessel. The enemy ship tried to turn, tried to bring its own weapons to bear, but it was too slow. The human fire converged on its position, and the dreadnought simply ceased to exist, torn apart by the concentrated assault. "Enemy destroyed," reported the tactical officer. Scanning for next priority target, Nick allowed himself a tight smile. "Find me another big one. Let us teach these aliens why you do not threaten innocent people." Throughout the battle space, human ships moved with practiced coordination. They had trained for this, run through scenarios exactly like this hundreds of times. Every crew member knew their role, knew what needed to happen. There was no panic, no confusion, just professionals doing their job with deadly efficiency. The CSS Resolute, under Commander Lisa Grant, positioned herself between a cluster of Krathi frigates and one of the human carriers. The enemy ships were trying to target the carrier, hoping to destroy the source of the human fighter craft that were swarming through their formation. Lisa was not going to let that happen. "All power to forward shields," Lisa ordered. "Let them shoot at us. Amy, coordinate with the carrier. Tell them to launch the next fighter wing while we have the enemy's attention." The Resolute's shields flared as plasma fire hammered against them. The frigate's weapons were not strong enough to penetrate, but they were keeping the Resolute busy. That was fine with Lisa. Every second those frigates wasted, shooting at her shields was another second the carrier had to deploy more fighters, shields holding at 60%. The defensive systems officer reported. "We can take this all day." Lisa watched her tactical display, waiting for the right moment. The Krathi frigates were so focused on the Resolute that they had not noticed 3 human destroyers moving into position behind them. It was a classic mistake, one that human commanders had learned to never make. Never get so focused on one target that you forget to watch your back. "Now," Lisa said quietly. The 3 destroyers fired simultaneously. At this close range, the Krathi frigates had no chance to dodge. Missiles and magnetic accelerator rounds hit them from behind, penetrating their weaker rear armor. All 3 frigates exploded within seconds of each other. "Targets destroyed," Lisa's tactical officer reported. The carrier reports successful launch of their second fighter wing. "Good," Lisa replied. "Find us another group that needs a distraction. We are just getting started." In the space between the larger ships, a different kind of battle was taking place. Human fighters swarmed through the Krathi formation like angry hornets. These small craft were piloted by men and women who had trained their entire adult lives for combat. They knew their ships inside and out, could push them to limits that would terrify most pilots. Captain Greg Turner led his squadron through a cluster of enemy strike craft. His fighter was small and nimble, equipped with advanced engines that could change direction almost instantly. The Krathi pilots were good, experienced in their own way, but they had never faced anything like human fighters before. "Blue Squadron, break by pairs," Greg ordered over the squadron channel. "Danny, you are with me. Everyone else pick your targets and go hunting." Greg's wingman, Lieutenant Danny Wright, pulled into formation beside him. They had flown together for 3 years, trusted each other completely. That trust was essential in combat, where a moment's hesitation could mean death. A Krathi fighter dove toward them, its organic weapons ports opening to fire. Greg waited until the last possible second, then threw his fighter into a spin that would have crushed an unprepared pilot. The Krathi's shots missed by meters. Greg completed the spin, now behind his attacker, and fired a burst from his cannons. The Krathi fighter exploded. "Nice move, boss," Danny commented. "Got 2 more coming in from high angle." "I see them," Greg replied, already adjusting his course. "You take the left, I will take the right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. The 2 human fighters split apart, each targeting one of the incoming enemies. The Krathi pilots tried to follow, but they could not match the humans' maneuverability. Within seconds, both enemy fighters were debris. All across the battle space, the same scene played out. Human pilots using superior training and technology to dominate their opponents. The Krathi had numbers, but numbers meant nothing when each human pilot could take down 3 or 4 enemies before needing to rearm. Back on the Valiant, Commander Jake Morrison monitored the overall battle situation. The tactical display was almost completely in humanity's favor. The Krathi fleet was shattered. Individual ships trying desperately to fight back but unable to coordinate effectively. The human electronic warfare systems had seen to that, jamming their communications and spoofing their sensors. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the surviving Vexari forces," Lieutenant Amy Hughes reported. "They are asking if what they are seeing is real." Jake could not help but smile at that. He could imagine the shock the Vexari must be feeling, watching a species they considered primitive absolutely destroy the fleet that had defeated them so easily. "Tell them it is real," Jake said, "and tell them to stand by to receive survivors from the surface. Once we clear this orbit, they will need to start evacuation operations." Amy sent the message, then looked back at Jake. "Sir, the Vexari commander wants to know how we are doing this, how we are beating the Krathi so easily." Jake thought about that for a moment. How could he explain it in a way they would understand? Humans did not have the luxury of peace for thousands of years like the Vexari did. Earth was a harsh world that had forged humanity in fire. Every human alive was descended from survivors, from people who had learned to fight or die. That legacy lived in every human ship, every human crew. "Tell them we fight because we must," Jake finally said. "And when we fight to win." Lieutenant Pete Collins looked up from his tactical station. "Sir, the enemy fleet is attempting to regroup. It looks like they are trying to concentrate around their flagship." Jake studied the display. The Eternal Hunger sat at the center of the remaining Krathi forces, the largest and most powerful ship in their fleet. Thrak was trying to rally his ships to form some kind of defensive position. It was a smart move, one that might have worked against a different enemy. But Jake was not going to let that happen. "All ships focus fire on their flagship," Jake ordered. "Nick, I want the Defiant to take point. Hit that thing with everything you have got. Everyone else provide support and keep the smaller ships off her back." "Copy that, Commander." Nick's voice came back over the channel. "Defiant moving to engage. This is going to be satisfying." The CSS Defiant broke from the main formation and accelerated toward the Eternal Hunger. The massive Krathi flagship saw her coming and turned to meet the threat. Its weapon ports opened, dozens of them, preparing to unleash a devastating barrage. "All power to forward shields," Nick ordered calmly. "Helm straight at them. Do not deviate. Weapons, charge the main gun to full power." His crew responded instantly, everyone knowing their role. The Defiant's main weapon was a magnetic accelerator that ran nearly the entire length of the ship. It was designed to fire a single massive projectile with enough force to destroy anything in its path. But it took time to charge, time to build up the power necessary for such a shot, time that Nick was about to buy with his shield. The Eternal Hunger fired every weapon it had. Plasma cannons, energy lances, missile tubes, everything launched at once. The space between the destruction of the Eternal Hunger changed everything. Warmaster Thrak died without ever understanding how badly he had miscalculated. His flagship, the pride of the Krathi Dominion, was now just debris floating in the void. And with his death, the Krathi fleet's command structure collapsed completely. On dozens of surviving Krathi vessels, captains and sub-commanders stared at their displays in shock. Their Warmaster was dead, their flagship destroyed, and the humans showed no signs of stopping. Ship after ship continued to explode or go dark as human weapons found their marks with terrifying precision. The Krathi were warriors, bred for conquest and domination. But they were not fools. They understood when a battle was lost, and this battle was very, very lost. Commander Jake Morrison watched his tactical display as the enemy fleet began to scatter. Individual ships were breaking formation, trying to escape. Some were charging their hyperspace drives, attempting to flee the system. Others were just accelerating away at maximum speed, desperate to put distance between themselves and the human fleet. "Sir, we are reading power spikes from multiple Crathy vessels," Lieutenant Pete Collins reported. "They are trying to jump out." Jake had expected this. Any military force would try to retreat when facing overwhelming defeat. But he could not let them go, not yet. These ships had come here to commit genocide. If they escaped, they would just regroup and attack another world, kill more innocent people. "Activate electronic warfare countermeasures," Jake ordered. "Target their hyperspace drives. Scramble their jump calculations." Across the human fleet, specialized vessels dedicated to electronic warfare went to work. They were smaller ships, not heavily armed, but they carried some of the most advanced computer systems in the human navy. Their job was to disrupt enemy systems, to hack into networks and cause chaos. The technicians on these ships were experts in their field, trained in both computer science and military tactics. They knew exactly how to target hyperspace drives, how to introduce errors into navigation computers without the enemy realizing it until too late. The Crathy ships that tried to jump found their systems malfunctioning. Coordinates that should have taken them to safety instead dumped them right back into the battle zone, sometimes even closer to the human fleet than they had been before. Other ships found their drives refusing to engage at all, trapped in normal space with no way to escape. Enemy jump attempts failing, Pete reported with satisfaction. "They are trapped here with us." Jake nodded. "Open a channel on all frequencies. Let me talk to them." Amy worked her controls, establishing a broadcast that every Crathy ship would receive. "Channel open, sir." Jake stood from his command chair, his voice calm and steady as he spoke. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Earthship CSS Valiant to all Crathy vessels. Your War Master is dead. Your flagship is destroyed. You have lost this battle. Power down your weapons and shields. Surrender now, and you will be treated as prisoners of war according to galactic conventions. Continue fighting, and we will destroy every last one of you. You have 60 seconds to decide." He closed the channel and sat back down, watching the tactical display. The Crathy fleet was still scattered, still trying to escape, but the firing had slowed. Ships that had been launching desperate attacks were now going quiet, their captains thinking about Jake's words. On the bridge of one of the surviving Crathy cruisers, Captain Zach stared at his display with bitter resignation. He had served the Dominion for 20 years, won battles across a dozen systems, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans had destroyed his fleet in less than 20 minutes. 20 minutes. It took longer than that to properly scan a new system. "What are your orders, Captain?" his second-in-command asked nervously. Zach thought about his options. He could keep fighting, could try to take a few more human ships with him before they destroyed his vessel. It would be a glorious death, the kind that Crathy warriors were supposed to seek. But it would also be pointless. The battle was over. Continuing to fight would not change that. It would just get his crew killed for nothing. "Power down weapons," Zach ordered quietly. "Drop shields. Send the surrender signal." Similar conversations were happening across the Crathy fleet. Some captains chose to keep fighting, driven by pride or ideology or simple fear of what surrender might mean. These ships the human fleet destroyed without mercy. But most chose to surrender, powering down their systems and transmitting the universal signal for capitulation. Within 5 minutes of Jake's broadcast, the battle was effectively over. Of the 312 Crathy ships that had been preparing to bombard Corvath, 51 remained intact and had surrendered. The rest were either destroyed or so badly damaged they posed no threat. The human fleet had achieved complete victory without losing a single vessel. On the planet below, the Vexari people watched their orbital displays in stunned disbelief. The massive red markers that had represented the Crathy fleet were gone, replaced by friendly blue icons showing human ships. The death sentence that had been hanging over their heads for hours had been lifted in less than half an hour. In shelters and bunkers across the planet, people began to cry. Some from relief, others from joy, many from simple disbelief that they were going to live. Children who had been saying goodbye to their parents were now being held tight in grateful embraces. Families that had been preparing for the end were now thinking about tomorrow. Commander Lisa Grant, aboard the CSS Resolute, received a transmission from the surface that made her own eyes water. It was a video message from a Vexari mother holding her 2 young children, all 3 of them crying as they thanked the humans for saving their lives. Lisa had joined the military to protect people, to stand between innocents and those who would harm them. This moment, seeing the lives they had saved, made every hard day of training worth it. "Sir, we are receiving transmissions from the Vexari survivors," Lieutenant Amy Hughes reported to Jake. "They want to send ships to pick up people from the surface. They are also asking for permission to approach our fleet." Jake nodded. "Grant permission, and contact the medical teams. I want every available doctor and medic ready to treat wounded once we get the Vexari civilians to safety." While the human fleet maintained position around the planet, organizing the surrender of the Krathi ships and coordinating with the Vexari survivors, word of the battle was already spreading across the galaxy at the speed of light. The Galactic Council received the first reports less than an hour after the fighting ended. Ambassador Kelrin sat in his private chambers, reviewing the tactical recordings that the human fleet had transmitted. He watched the entire battle from start to finish, seeing human ships move with precision that seemed impossible. Seeing weapons that tore through Krathi armor like it was paper. Seeing a fleet of fewer than 60 ships destroy a force 5 times their size without breaking a sweat. "By the ancestors," Kelrin whispered. "What have we done?" What he meant was, what had the galaxy done by dismissing humanity as primitive? How had they missed the fact that humans were building weapons and training crews that surpassed anything the established civilizations possessed? The Council had looked at humanity and seen children. They should have looked closer. Within hours, every member of the Galactic Council had seen the recordings. Emergency sessions were called. Ambassadors who had previously ignored or dismissed humanity were now demanding to know everything about them. Where did they come from? What was their world like? How had they become such effective warriors? The answers, when they came, painted a picture that many found disturbing. Earth was a death world, a planet so harsh that most species would consider it uninhabitable. Extreme weather, dangerous predators, diseases that could wipe out entire populations. Humans had evolved in an environment that punished weakness and rewarded adaptability. And then there was human history. Unlike many species that had achieved peaceful global civilization relatively early, humans had fought among themselves for thousands of years. Wars that lasted generations, conflicts that killed millions. They had perfected the art of violence in ways that species who had known peace could barely comprehend. But what really concerned the Council was realizing that humanity had kept most of their military capabilities secret. The ships they had shown to the galaxy were real, but they were not the best humanity had to offer. The weapon systems demonstrated at Korvath were impressive, but intelligence reports suggested that human research labs had even more advanced systems in development. Humanity had been preparing, not for conquest, but for the moment when they would need to defend themselves or others. They had seen the galaxy, seen the threats that existed out there, and decided to make sure they could handle any of them. Back at Korvath, the cleanup operations continued for several days. Human medical teams worked alongside Vexari doctors to treat the wounded. Engineers helped repair damaged infrastructure on the planet. The surrendered Krathi ships were secured and their crews placed in detention facilities until the Council could decide what to do with them. Commander Jake Morrison spent those days coordinating the operations and filing reports for Fleet Command. He also spoke with several Vexari officials who wanted to thank him personally. Each conversation was both humbling and 3 months after the Battle of Korvath, the Galactic Council held a ceremony that would be remembered for generations. The Grand Chamber on the Council's central station was filled to capacity, with representatives from every member species in attendance. Cameras broadcast the event across the galaxy, allowing billions to watch. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the central platform, uncomfortable in his formal dress uniform. He was a military officer, not a politician, and ceremonies like this made him nervous. Beside him stood several other officers from the fleet, including Captain Nick Bradley and Commander Lisa Grant. All of them looked equally uncomfortable. Ambassador Kelrin approached the platform, moving with the slow dignity that his species valued. In his hands he carried a crystalline object that glowed with soft blue light. It was the Star of Valor, the highest honor the Galactic Council could bestow on a non-member for military service. Commander Morrison, Kelrin began, his voice carrying through the chamber's translation system. On behalf of the Galactic Council and the people of Korvath, I present you with this recognition. Your actions saved 2 billion lives and demonstrated courage beyond measure. Jake accepted the crystal, then stepped up to the microphone that had been provided. He had been told he needed to make a speech, something inspiring that people across the galaxy could remember. He had written and rewritten it a dozen times, never satisfied with how the words sounded. In the end, he decided to just speak from the heart. I accept this honor on behalf of every man and woman who served at Korvath, Jake said. But I want to be clear about something. We did not come to your system because we wanted glory or recognition. We came because it was the right thing to do. Because innocent people needed help, and we had the ability to provide it. He paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Humanity is not interested in conquest or domination. We have seen enough war on our own world to know that such things only lead to suffering. What we want is peace, but we have also learned that peace must be protected. There will always be those who seek to harm others, to take what is not theirs, to destroy rather than build. And when those threats arise, someone needs to stand against them. Jake held up the crystal so everyone could see it. We will be that someone, not because we are better than anyone else, but because we can. Because we have the training, the weapons, the will to fight when fighting is necessary. And we will do so not just for Earth, but for any world that needs protection. That is our promise to this galaxy. The chamber erupted in applause. Jake stepped back from the microphone, relieved that the speech was over. Kelrin approached him again, this time speaking quietly so only Jake could hear. Your words today will change much, Commander. Already there are species requesting Earth's assistance with their own security problems. Are your people prepared for what comes next? Jake thought about that question. Was Earth prepared? They had fewer than 200 warships total. The galaxy had thousands of inhabited worlds. They could not protect everyone, could not be everywhere at once. But they could try. They could do their best. We will manage, Jake said simply. In the months that followed, humanity's role in galactic affairs expanded rapidly. The Galactic Council formally invited Earth to join as a full voting member, a process that usually took decades but was rushed through in weeks. Human ambassadors took their seats in the council chamber, representing their species in discussions about trade, diplomacy, and security. But more significantly, Earth began receiving requests for military assistance from species across the galaxy. Some were facing threats from pirates or raiders. Others had border disputes with aggressive neighbors. A few were dealing with the aftermath of the Krathi attacks, trying to rebuild while fearing another invasion. Admiral Hayes, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of all Earth's space forces, worked 16-hour days trying to coordinate the response. He established protocols for how Earth would evaluate requests, what constituted a legitimate need for intervention, and how to allocate their limited resources. The CSS Valiant became the flagship of a new task force dedicated to responding to galactic threats. Jake was promoted to captain and given command of the task force, which consisted of 20 ships and 5,000 personnel. His mission was simple on paper but complex in execution. Go where needed, help those who required it, and maintain Earth's reputation as a protector of the innocent. Their first mission after Korvath took them to the Helios system, where a criminal organization had taken over several orbital stations and was holding thousands of civilians hostage. The local government had tried to negotiate, but the criminals kept raising their demands. They believed they were untouchable, that no military force would risk an assault that might kill the hostages. They had not counted on human special forces. Jake's task force arrived in the system and immediately began planning the rescue operation. Instead of the overwhelming force they had used at Korvath, this situation required precision and subtlety. Teams of highly trained operators would board the station simultaneously, neutralize the criminals, and secure the hostages before anyone could be hurt. The operation took 8 hours from start to finish. When it was over, all the hostages were safe, the criminal organization was destroyed, and the local government was stunned by the efficiency of the human response. Once again, word spread across the galaxy about what humanity could do. Captain Greg Turner, the fighter pilot who had distinguished himself at Korvath, found himself leading training missions to teach other species how to improve their combat effectiveness. He worked with Vexari pilots, Talari gunners, Chitauri navigators, and dozens of other species. It was challenging because each species had different strengths and weaknesses, different ways of thinking about combat. But Greg discovered something interesting. When he taught them human tactics, when he showed them how to think like a human warrior, they improved dramatically. It was not that other species could not fight. They just had never needed to develop the same intensity that humanity had. The problem, Greg explained to a class of Vexari pilots, is that most of you think of combat as a game with rules. You expect your enemy to follow certain conventions to fight honorably, but real combat is not like that. Real combat is about doing whatever it takes to win, to protect your people and complete your mission. You need to stop thinking like sportsmen and start thinking like survivors. The concept was foreign to many of the alien pilots, but those who embraced it became much more effective. Within a year, the first mixed human-alien squadrons were formed, combining human tactical thinking with alien technological advantages. On Earth itself, the changes were just as dramatic. Humanity's sudden prominence in galactic affairs brought opportunities and challenges. Trade agreements flooded in, offering Earth access to technologies and resources that would have taken centuries to develop independently. Universities established xenology departments to study alien cultures. Cities built embassies to house diplomatic missions from dozens of species. But there were also concerns. Some people worried that Earth was taking on too much responsibility, that they were spreading themselves too thin trying to protect others. There were debates about military spending, about whether Earth should continue expanding its fleet or focus on domestic concerns. The government's response was to put the question to the people. A global referendum asked a simple question. Should Earth continue serving as a galactic protector? The vote was not even close. 78% of humanity voted yes. They had seen the recordings from Korvath. They had heard the stories of people saved, worlds protected, and they felt proud that their species was making a positive difference in the galaxy. Back in space, Jake and his task force responded to crisis after crisis. They broke up a slavery ring in the outer reaches. They mediated a border dispute between two species that had been on the brink of war. They rescued a research station that had been attacked by unknown raiders. Each mission added to Earth's reputation, to the growing legend of human capabilities. But Jake never forgot what Ambassador Kelran had asked him at the ceremony. Was Earth prepared for what came next? The truth was, he still did not know. They were learning as they went, making mistakes and correcting them, trying to balance their desire to help with the practical limitations of their resources. One evening, Jake sat in his quarters aboard the Valiant, reviewing reports from the latest mission. They had just finished helping a species called the Norathi defend their colony from pirates. It had been a successful operation. No casualties on either side except for the pirates who had refused to surrender. His door chimed, and Commander Lisa Grant entered. She had become his second-in-command on the task force, someone he trusted completely to handle complex situations. Rough day? Lisa asked, noting the tired expression on Jake's face. Just thinking, Jake replied. 6 months ago we were nobody. Just another species trying to find our place in the galaxy. Now everyone looks to us for protection. It is a lot of responsibility. Lisa sat down across from him. Do you regret it? Taking on this role? Jake thought about that question seriously. Did he regret it? They had saved millions of lives in the past 6 months. They had stopped criminal,